Now we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center, sponsored by Fieldstone Communities Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone offers innovative and compassionate care, and they're now accepting residents. They also offer day stay and respite programs. So grab a pencil and jot down 360-689-4314 to schedule a tour of Fieldstone's beautifully appointed apartments on Rolling Bay today. And I'd also like to acknowledge that the Senior Community Center is on the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Suquamish tribe, the people of the clear salt water. We honor them and are grateful for their hospitality. And today, David Harrison checks in with his monthly review of national politics. David was the founder and executive director of the Northwest Policy Center at the University of Washington. As a senior lecturer, he taught policy analysis for many years at the university's Evans School. Good morning, David.
Let's see that another veteran activist has joined us. I saw Cynthia Schick in the grocery store, and we were doing backflips down the aisle because there wasn't a surge. And now, of course, in retrospect, we thought, well, if there's not going to be a surge, maybe we should hold on to the House. But careful what you wish for, because holding on to the House by 2 votes or so would not have been such a spectacular time anyway. Yeah. But another person I saw at the grocery store said to me, David, when you said there wasn't going to, in advance of the election, so there wasn't going to be a surge, I thought you were hallucinating. So I feel pretty good about my predictions. I went back and said what I said, and I was remembering it wrong. I knew I said +1 in the Senate, which is what's going to happen when Warnock wins. And I knew I said Fetterman was going to win for sure. And I knew that I said we would take back some governor's races, but I thought that I had said that ours would be +11. And unfortunately, I said it would be +14. That's going to turn out to be, hi, Robin Hunt. It turns out to be +10 or so. I want to start, as you know, we do 3 segments. The first segment, I want us to talk together about what happened on 2 fronts, why it didn't turn out to, the predicted surge did not materialize, but even more importantly, not just why it was mispredicted, but why we did better than anticipated, which is sort of a different thing. And then secondly, I want to talk about what's going to happen in the next 2 years, how losing the House changes our position, what we can get accomplished, and what we can't get accomplished. Since it turns out that 80% of the pretty monumental achievements of the Biden presidency will be in his first 2 years. And then I want to say a little bit about what's happening to Trump, especially in the courtroom. And then we'll be done. And as is our custom, I'll stop after each segment and take your thoughts, concerns, insights, and insults. So that's our story. First, there's been a lot of writing, as usually happens after the election, about who got it wrong and who didn't get it wrong. And I was the week before the election when David Brooks and Chuck Todd of NBC quite notably kept on saying surge, surge, surge. I thought that that was offensive because what they were basing it on. So it's what's been pointed out, and we talked about a little bit, is the before the election is the zone was flooded with Republican affiliated or sponsored polls. Marist, Quinnipiac, and some others, NBC, who had normally polled during that time, were not polling. And if you stripped out and just went with bipartisan polls, there was no surge to be had. It's especially irritating because you could argue, you're never going to know, that them saying that there was going to be a surge might have discouraged or otherwise affected Democratic voters negatively. I don't know. It could be the opposite. So we're not going to know. But you could argue that if they had said the truth, that it's going to be spectacularly close, maybe we would have done a little bit better. Again, we're not going to know. So use worrying about it. What else are they saying happened besides that people, excuse me, like David Brooks paid too much attention to Republican polls? It is said that they paid too little attention to special elections from the last year. As we noted once in my blog, there were 6 or so special elections in which we always were running better than anticipated. So it was argued that was a better indication even than polling, actual performance. And then, of course, what is argued is that the press the pundits got so enamored of the inflation beats choice argument that they talked themselves into more than was the case. And that especially in swing states, as was how it turned out, choice was driving Democratic turnout and independent voter turnout very substantially and more than predicted. And that's proven with post-election polls. So all those things happen. I've got 2 other things that I wanted to raise with us before you comment. And one is, I think that on the choice issue, we thought about that when Kansas responded had a referendum, and that's the reason why the Democratic governor of Kansas was reelected. Notably, because of choice, the Democrats took back the state Senate, state House in Michigan for the first time in 40 years. There were 6 choice referendums on the ballot, including the anti-choicers putting it up in Kentucky, and we won all 6. So I think it's more than just saying this wasn't exactly predicted to happen this way. It goes to the level of, could we not forget that this is going on? It's how Tony Evers survived as governor in Wisconsin. It's how Whitmer rolled up a nice advantage. It's how we beat Kerry Lake as governor of Arizona. Can we remember this? Because it will still be out there especially as a swing state battle 2 years from now. So I think that's worth scoring and underscoring. I also think that the fact that gas prices had started to come down a little bit, it's the #1 inflation concern for citizens. And if we would have won a few more seats if it's gone down another 20, 30 cents. There's one other issue I want to make sure, 2 other issues I want to make sure that we remember. That's not so much about misprediction, but about how we win. First, of course, it turns out that it matters who the actual candidates are on the ballot. So a lot of us threw some money into the Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez election, and we didn't even know for sure that we had a chance. We just suspected that an opponent calling for arresting Dr. Fauci and charging him with murder might have been an over-the-top campaign position for the Republican, as was hiring oath keepers or whatever they are as campaign consultants. So we won that by 2,000 votes with some Republican help in Southwest Michigan. And it just underscores, it really does matter who you're running. Think of the sour-faced, sourpuss Matt Larkin trying to beat Kim Schreier, and he got 47% of the vote. Just think if that had been a candidate who wasn't just a jerk, somebody who had credentials doing things and thinking positively about the future of America. So I really think that there's a lesson that having to get Donald Trump's endorsement, and having to say that the last election 2 years ago was a fraud, B, was not a great way for them to recruit candidates. And that the #1 way they could have won 30 seats rather than 10, would have been to pay attention to who they were presenting for office. It still matters. I am also of the very strong opinion that the last week when Donald Pelosi got hammered on the head and Joe Biden did a national address on Friday night about democracy being on the ballot, and he and Obama fanning around saying exactly that mattered. I think that it turned out that that was a resonant final issue that the Republicans created for themselves. And for evidence of that, you go to 4 states where election deniers were running for Secretary of State. They had 5 states, they won in Indiana, but in Arizona, I'm going to forget, Michigan, 4 states that deniers were on the ballot. We defeated them primarily because they were deniers. So to make a long story short, oh, and of course we won governorships of swing states, quite notably. We won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona. And those are states where pundits were saying, well, are they going to, is somebody going to try and do a coup in 2024? It's a little harder to abuse the election process when the Democratic, when you have a Democratic governor. And point of fact, as you know, Ducey and Kemp helped protect the Republic last time. So anyway, to make a long story short, that was a little too long. We didn't have a surge. We didn't have a surge because we continue to fight fiercely. We have ever since that man was elected in 2016. The issue as Trump wanes will be whether we can continue to do so. And we've done it by mammoth organizing, by each of you participating in some way. The big issue for 2024 is whether, helped by the wars between Republicans and Republicans, helped by the choice issue, helped by our strong margins with Democrats and independents, we can continue this run of better than expected elections. And obviously, we hope we can run that all through the presidential election in 2024. So I'll stop there and let's meditate for a minute on the results that we secured.
If you have any comments, go ahead and unmute, or questions.
Why, David, do you think the Ron Johnson won in Wisconsin?
I think we were just short. I think we could have won 4 days after that. As you may know, in my not good news, I was talking about what I said right before the election was that Fetterman was going to win, that I was worried that we were going to lose Nevada. We almost did, won it at the end. I wasn't worried about Mark Kelly. And then I put in order who I thought might be a take it back seat besides Fetterman. And I put both Sherry Beasley and Ryan ahead of the idea that Mandela Barnes would win. And he lost by the thinnest of margins. I just think that Ron Johnson had incumbency going for him. And when you lose by 0.5%, another 10 cents off gas prices could put you over the top. We almost did it. I don't think there was an error or anything. I just think we didn't quite make it. It's too bad because it's just absolutely time for Ron Johnson to go home. It's too bad.
Hey, Rita, you have a question?
I was going to say, to me, it seems like over the next 2 years, and well, over the next 20 years and looking into the future, that we really need to get young people engaged, starting at the high school level and into college, and the young people working because they're what's going to be here. We won't all be here. And I think to have that continuation, to have that, long range plan, and I'm sure you guys do, but it just seems to me that that's really going to be an important thing in winning the next years.
There's been, since 2016, quite an increase in the efforts by music stars and actors and such to accelerate the increase in political participation of young people. And in Georgia right now, it's pretty startling, the polls in terms of how we're doing with ages 18 through 50 as opposed to older folks. So it is a remarkable, it's up, but it's still nowhere in relation to older voters. And it's a big challenge because it's a challenge for Democrats because we win those age cohorts quite nicely. Also, of course, as some of you know, I'm very, very big on us understanding the Latino population. We would not have won Nevada and Arizona without the efforts of Latino organizers who we supported in my blog, and millions of other people supported. And there's 1 million Latinos in Georgia, believe it or not. So we need to, we're winning now Latino voters 70-30, and we need to continue to prove that we need business there. So there are a lot of fronts that deserve special attention. There's some criticism of the Democratic National Committee over coming in to losing Camp Perez late and so forth. I just don't know about that. But I don't think, if for those of us who are trying to do regular giving, I wouldn't give to the DNC anyway. I would give to organizing groups and others that are pushing into communities in the way that the formal Democratic Party finds it hard to do. I mean, I for years, Kilbane as well, and Sheila, some of the rest of us have been to Democratic meetings in Kitsap County. It's not necessarily the go-to meeting. When people are hanging out on the island saying, let's go to a meeting, they don't necessarily hie on over to Silverdale or Paulsbo for a Democratic Party meeting. It's just not the way that people work. Other thoughts and questions about what happened on last Tuesday, a couple weeks ago?
Tom, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, I am unmuted. I just rushing a fly off my head, but I do have a question. What happened in New York? What the hell? What, they just didn't pay attention or what?
Yeah, that's strange because absent New York, our results would be much better. I think the governor, Kathy, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Hochul, I think they're paying a little bit for the Cuomo change, and that Zeldin, even though he's not a nice person, was they benefited from having somebody who was a Republican congressman who therefore had some legitimacy. And I think in New York, more than other places, they were swept a little bit into the search talk. That's all I can think of. But it's definitely too bad because we dropped some seats there that we didn't need to drop. It could be that they ran, I don't know this to be true, maybe they were less enthralled to Trump and ran somewhat better candidates, because all across the West, as you know, they just picked the most maniacal person they could find and then ran them, which is great. I wish they could do that more often.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, Cynthia.
Yeah, my mic is on, right?
Yeah, it's on.
So there's a lot of conversation about this huge divide that's continuing to grow between the Democrats and the Republicans. But I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on the divide within the Republican Party, and how will that affect our elections going forward? And I keep seeing all these Trump-sponsored candidates wanting to arrest Anthony Fauci and denying the election. And it's so insulting to their constituency if the Republicans think that there's that many suckers out there. And I would just think that even adds to to the struggle in the Republican Party, and how might it influence our actions as Democrats and our successes as Democrats?
I think we need to watch that carefully because first, from the outset, you said, I don't know that there is necessarily growing division between Democrats and Republicans. There's a lot, but we just got 12 Republican votes for gay marriage. So there's got to be some Republicans out there and Republican support for what Biden's doing in Ukraine is very substantial. They joined us in passing the infrastructure bill, the China competitiveness bill. So certainly there are zones where the disputes are rabid, but I think in terms of actions, there's still some working across party lines. In terms of going forward, I think the danger is that the Republicans will figure out enough that the gift that they keep on giving us will stop. That would be awful, because almost a quarter of the Democratic voters said when being polled after they voted that their number one reason they went to the polls was to combat Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He is a get out the vote, Democratic get out the vote machine. They should have had him stay away from Pennsylvania and Georgia. That was and Arizona. I mean, so the reason that's the case is that Trump's, as we've often said, Trump's strategies to maintain his base are anathema to independent voters, especially women. So the very thing that holds that base, though it's deteriorating, is something that makes it hard to grow the base. And that's been true for a long time. Going forward, as Cynthia says, well, what can we depend upon? Right now, there's a huge war between McConnell and Trump, and you got the lieutenant governor, Republican lieutenant governor in Georgia, going on the tube this morning and saying that he didn't vote for Herschel Walker. And you've got Trump not going into Georgia because Herschel Walker needs him not to. So right now it's lovely. It's just as Trump diminishes, obviously we're advantaged from whatever warfare can emerge. So one thing to watch is Nikki Haley said she wasn't going to run against Trump. She just announced that she's thinking about this over Christmas. And I think what you're going to get is Nikki Haley is so worried about DeSantis that she's going to go in early as well. Chris Christie, Asa Hutchinson, those folks, that's just noise. They're not going to be president. But Nikki Haley could be, or their nominee. So I think you'll start seeing people come in, and then you'll see what's Trump going to do. He's already announced he's got a war chest. Let's predict that he will not slide gracefully away. Let's predict that this is going to be a food fight for the next year, which is
Wow.
good. Which is good.
Food fight. Okay.
Any other questions before we go on to the second segment? So
I
we
think-
need.
yeah.
We need to talk before we run out of time or what's going to happen over the next 2 years. Some things are safe. It's interesting. Newt Gingrich said in an article yesterday that Biden has done a amazing job of meeting Biden's objectives. And I think it's time for us to understand that it's the best legislative package. Did it with 50 votes in the Senate. Best set of legislative achievements, perhaps since the New Deal. And it's both reconciliation bills, massive response to COVID and to the COVID cost recession, but a huge infrastructure bill, biggest ever, the biggest package of climate incentives ever, the biggest child investment in fighting child poverty forever. So it's amazing. So what's savable? Almost all of it, because it's hard. But Kevin McCarthy has such a small majority that a lot of these things are safe. Certainly the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the China competitiveness bill. What they're going to try and take apart is some of the climate incentives that Manchin agreed to in the reconciliation bill. And that would be, and they'll still try to take apart Obamacare unsuccessfully. So their number one target will be the last thing we did, the climate incentives, strangely. I don't know why they would want to. And the bigger target than that is the overall concept of fighting democratic spending. And as you remember, we did get a little ambitious in some of those numbers because Biden knew he might lose one of the houses during the midterms. So he's accomplished 80% of what he's going to. The biggest singles, here's the good news. The biggest single challenge is budget and spending levels. But the strategy that Republicans have on that issue, as you know, is to shut the government down. And we've been down that road before. And what happens is if you shut the government down for 10 days, eventually the stock market's going to lose 2,000 points. And the Republican investors, or all of us, will call Republican congressmen and say, A, it's not working, and B, it's costing me money off of my assets. And then the Republicans who care about Wall Street, which is still 100 or so of them or more, then they have to go to Kevin McCarthy and say, we have to cut a deal because this is polling as a 65-35% issue where people aren't blaming Democrats for spending, they're blaming Republicans for shutting down the government. So that's what's going to happen. They were thinking they could raise the debt ceiling now to cover the whole next 2 years, not going to be able to. And so, so that means somewhere in the future, we will have a big, enormous budget battle, and it'll play out the same way it did. The other thing I want to do, as you know, is investigate Hunter Biden and Mayorkas, the Homeland Security guy. And that won't play out well either because Jim Jordan is chair of the Judiciary Committee, and they just don't know how to do that. I mean, they think he's just the Republican equivalent of Adam Schiff, but he's not. In terms of playing it out to independents, they would need to take somebody who's not quivering and excitement about saying awful things. They would need to have somebody who sort of like the investigation, our Benny Thompson, our chair, and somebody that's more deliberate and less assaultive. So that's what's going to happen. I would also note that they're not going to touch gay marriage. They're not going to touch federal judges. That's just a Senate appointment. We'll have 51 rather than 50. They're not going to touch infrastructure, chips. This last little bit of electoral reform, they won't touch. And they're not going to touch Ukraine for all the chirping that McCarthy does about Ukraine. Biden has the votes he needs to do everything he wants to do in Ukraine. It's not disadvantageous for him to have 60 Republicans complain about it because Biden is happy to claim the majority on Ukraine. It's been a fight. He's reassembled NATO. He's armed Zelensky, and it's nothing but it's an awful thing for Ukrainians. But in terms of how it plays out in the United States, we're not going to turn away from Zelensky, and there will never be enough Republican votes to do that. So that's what's going to happen in the next 2 years as per our collective crystal ball. Any questions, thoughts, and concerns before we go on to our third segment?
Anybody? Let's see. Nope, I think we're going to go on.
Oh, yeah.
Christina.
Yeah. But that doesn't seem like a winning strategy for the Republicans. What are they going to campaign on for 2024? That's
Good question.
That's not winning.
Yeah, I think there's not a legislative package for what they're going to campaign on. So they're going to campaign on course, it depends on who our presidential candidate is, but on the issue side, they're going to campaign on two fronts. First, they're going to campaign on Democratic spending, even though they won't win in shutting down the government, it will be an issue. And we're helped by coming out of the recession. So our Biden era deficits are obviously lower than the Trump era deficits. But as you wouldn't necessarily argue that we were, during this period, that we were the world's most careful spenders. That was intentional, of course. We wanted to prime the economy. But I think we should have understood inflationary pressures a little bit more religiously than we did. It's not like there weren't some Democrats warning Larry Summers and Janet Yellen said that the Fed Reserve could handle that pressures. And I think those pressures, and they might have been able to without supply chain flaws and the war and so forth. But I think we're a little vulnerable on the economy. But of course, if inflation 2 years from now, if inflation's back to a manageable zone in the economy, and we still have all the jobs that Joe Biden created, they're going to have a hard time on that. I don't think American people are assemblable as a political unit on the level of the deficit. I think that's been proven. So the other big issue, as you know, Christina, is they are going to invent some issues. You know, these poor transgender athletes, there's like 200 of them in the country, and it's a national campaign thing because they're campaigning for the same grievance that Trump had in 2016. Things are happening in the world that are hard for us to understand and rebuke. And to the extent we don't like those things, it's the fault of Democrats. That school curriculum, LGBTQ, and any of another host of what DeSantis, DeSanctimonious says are woke issues. I just don't see it. I think it does have to do with us presenting candidates who you can imagine in your backyard. To this day, I think John Kerry and Al Gore and certain other candidates, Hillary, you couldn't imagine having barbecue with them, where obviously everybody in the world wants to meet Obama, and Joe Biden is a guy. I mean, he's just, that's why he won, part of why he won. So I think a lot is who we're going to run in terms of how they campaign against us. Beyond those two issues, it depends on who our candidate is. I'm here to tell you, Joe Biden's not running. There's no way in the world he's running. He's just trying to keep that going till after the midterms, so that it wouldn't be an issue. He will be 82 years old. Many of us on this call are over 70, and there's not a one of us who aspires to maintain the schedule of the President of the United States. He's not running. So that's going to be interesting because Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren, their Senate terms are up. So they'd have to give up their Senate terms to run, which is no small thing. Kamala Harris, Buttigieg, and others are flying their flag. Gretchen Whitmer is, Gavin Newsom is. It'll be interesting. That'll start pretty soon, so we'll have to do a session pretty soon on that. I would like to say a little bit about Trump's legal problems before we close. Do we have any other comments on what's happening now over there?
Tom, you're unmuted.
Yeah, in terms of Biden and, running or not running, I think we need, Democrats need to have time for the candidates that are going to run to, make their points and get out and campaign. And with Biden, saying he's running, I don't think he's going to run either. I mean, I just think it's going to be difficult, and we're giving up the time for the Republicans to make all their points. they're gonna be running hard for, the next 2 years. And how do
But
we
they'll,
at
but
that?
Tom, they'll be beating up on each other too. I think, remember when Biden got nominated, it seemed like there were 10 televised Democratic debates. So it didn't seem at the time that we had insufficient time. But I agree with you. We don't want to let for Biden to hold on so long that it will prevent us from having our own narrative this year. It's a delicate balance to announce that you're clearly a lame duck is not the greatest thing in the world. So I think you'll get a stage where it's well understood by Democratic candidates that he's not running, but before they start formal campaigns. So I think you'll get a 6-month zone. I don't think he'll say in January. I think it'll be more like May. Sheila.
Can I put in my word for my favorite person, Pete Buttigieg?
I knew you were going to do that.
Thank you, Karen. Gotta do
But
it, gotta do it.
You want an outstanding articulator of what America should be, and
Yep.
yeah, I don't think he'll be the nominee. He may. I mean, I'm ashamed of why he wouldn't be if he isn't. Although I would say, remember, the biggest election he's ever been in is for the mayor of South Bend. Christine Rolfes has gotten more votes regularly than he ever had in his life. So, but that doesn't mean he can't run. She'd be a good candidate.
Oh, yes, she would. She's amazing.
Yeah, she's my former student. So
Yeah. Oh, well, see, there you go, David.
Yeah.
Hey, Cynthia, do you have something to say?
Yeah, just one. I'll try not to have it make a long answer, but you were talking about the fronts that the Republicans could run on, and I was kind of disturbed by the news yesterday. There were two things that I thought made Biden's promises look like they were more hype than actually came out, and that was the railroad union workers won't get their sick pay, and I know that's not his fault, and also that the people with the college debt are back on pins and needles on whether what he said he was going to do for them 6 months ago, he's actually going to follow through. And I was just thinking that could help the Republicans put some kind of a cloud over just Democratic governing. And did you have any thoughts about those two things?
yeah. So on the first thing, 8 of the 12 union, it's, if you're negotiating, you emphasize what you didn't get. It's an amazing package. I mean, if you look at the details, but no, I don't think that there's any room. The Republicans are, I don't think, no, they can't argue. Basically what McCarthy said is this should have been anticipated, but I don't know what the Republican position would be. They're certainly not going to argue that, for sick leave. So I don't think he's vulnerable. I think he was hoping that the 8 unions that agreed to it would convince the other 4. I'm not against paid sick leave. I'm just saying, looking at the whole package, it's impressive. On student loans, the reason it took Joe Biden so long to put his package out there is that his statutory authority to do what he did is highly questionable. So he figured out what he thought he could do that might survive the review of the courts, but it's not clear that there is executive branch authority to spend that money in that way. And that's so if the Supreme Court says, no, you can't do that, won't be any constitutional issue. It'll just be a reading it will be a reading, well, constitutional in the extent that it will be a study of executive powers that beyond those that are presented in the statute. So that will be the argument. If Biden doesn't succeed, then he'll get points for having tried, and he won't be blamed by the student loan forgiveness receivers because there will be the Supreme Court that has said that that it can't happen.
Oh, thank you.
I have to say something to my sweetie, and then I'll be back for our last segment. Please
Okay.
talk among yourselves for 1 minute.
Yeah, I just think it's a shame with the, and I was shocked to hear when railroad folks did not get any sick pay time. I shocked and appalled, but then found out that they're not the only people that are possibly unionized that do not get that. I mean, I find that inhumane myself. I don't know how you all feel, but I was shocked to hear that. So, but the pay package, it looks really good for them, but time off, wow, that's just something else. So, and speaking of Pete Buttigieg, he is an amazing person. I hope you've all had a chance to listen to him speak. He's articulate, he's bright, he knows everything about everything pretty much. I mean, he's a transportation secretary, but boy, you want to add to that, Sheila?
Yeah, and how he negotiated with the folks in South Bend, because he, it was a difficult situation. He came in and talked with everybody. I mean, what is there to not like about the fact that he talks with anybody and everybody?
Right, exactly. Really grassroots.
Yeah,
Pretty great guys.
marvelous fella.
Who's,
Okay, David,
who talks with anybody and everybody?
we're talking about Pete Buttigieg.
Oh, yeah,
Air
that's
Pete.
great. I mean, the first time, just go back to the first time you ever heard him talk, and you didn't even know who he was, and you thought, boy, is it refreshing to have somebody articulate that clearly what America needs to be and do. I mean, it's just amazingly refreshing.
When I saw him over at Seattle, when he came to town, at the end of the presentation, he took questions from the audience. We had all been writing questions to him outside in the rain, and they put him in a great big fishbowl and throw him out. But he didn't talk to just everybody. He asked the person who had asked the question to either stand up or make notice that he had asked the question. And Buttigieg talked directly to him or her each time. He did not talk to the rest of us. He addressed the person who asked the question. And I was just,
Yeah.
he
I
was
think he's
fantastic in person, just as wonderful as you see him wherever.
I think he's showing himself well as Secretary of Transportation too. I think
Yes.
Biden did him a big favor by giving him that platform, and he's done well with it. I want to talk, and I think parenthetically, especially with COVID, it's been hard on Kamala Harris because she spent the first year 6 feet behind Biden with a mask on. They still haven't given her nearly the traction, or she hasn't taken it that Biden had when he was Obama's vice president. What will happen to Trump? This is getting pretty interesting. As you know, yesterday, the 11th Circuit massacred Judge Cannon, who had done the backing off the FBI on classified materials. And parenthetically, the New York Post had an article where Trump announced saying that he was a retiree who owned a golf course in Florida and maintained a library of classified materials. So Murdoch is now out after Trump, which is appropriate. At any rate, the 11th Circuit eliminated special master, and that works right into the hands of the new Jack Smith, the new special prosecutor. It means one of the two things that Jack Smith will do will be go out after Trump big time on classified documents. The court's not going to say that the president has a unilateral authority to declare documents his and property. It flies right in the face of the long-established law on presidential records, and I don't know why Trump persists. I mean, I think he should give them all back before he gets himself in real trouble. I also think that Merrick Garland naming a special prosecutor means that Trump's going to be indicted not on the insurrection, but on fraudulent electors. I think that Fonnie Willis and Fulton County will indict him on election fraud in Georgia, or attempted election fraud, and that Jack Smith will as well. And that before the spring, that he's going to have, instead of all these criminal and civil charges he faces, he's going to have very serious criminal charges. And I think that's why the other Republican candidates are sharpening their knives, because he's got declining popularity either way. He's perceived to have won the election either way, and loading up criminal charges. They can talk all they want about the Department of Justice being weaponized against Donald Trump, but 60% of American people on the classified records believe that the United States government is right. So I don't think there's a political downside for Democrats to have a special prosecutor prosecute Trump. I don't have any interest in Trump going to jail myself, but I do think that the issue is not how could Merrick Garland's DOJ indict Trump, former sitting president. I think the issue is how could they not? I mean, I don't think you can't have a coup in the United States without somebody being held responsible. I don't think. I mean, come on. I mean, what is permissible if a coup is permissible? And beyond that, if you read General Milley's book, he says that there was a back channel between Pompeo and all these folks and the Democrats about what they were going to do if he tried to engage the Pentagon. And to top it all off, there's a quote from Nancy Pelosi to Mike Pence. They're talking to each other on January 6th from undisclosed locations. And Nancy Pelosi says to Mike Pence, "Don't tell anybody where you are." That's all you need to know about whether
That's
Donald
chilling.
Trump should be indicted. I mean, don't tell anybody. The Speaker of the House saying to the Vice President of the United States, "Don't tell anybody where you are," tells you what you need to know. So
Yeah.
what else is happening? The civil trial is about to end. He might, his fall guy, his chief financial officer might bear the brunt. It all has to do with whether the jury the court finds that those fraudulent activities were done in behalf of the Trump organization or just in behalf of Weiselberg. There's other things. My favorite of all of them, before we close, is remember that the Supreme Court let the House Ways and Means Committee have Trump's tax returns. The chances that we're going to get to January 15th without hearing about how Trump didn't pay any taxes for 10 years and did other things that qualify as chicanery is zero. They're not within the court's order, as long as they put it in the context of what they told the court they were trying to find out. They can release a report. The Democrats can before they get shut down by the Republicans. They can release a report from the committee, including findings, even if it's not the returns themselves, including elaborate findings on what Trump did on taxes. And that's really a support killer for the American people once they hear the full story, and it happened just in time. There's articles in the media saying, "It's too late, it's too late." I promise you it's not too late. These committees have staff, they know how to write reports, and it turns out that there are members of the news media who would like to hear that news. That between now and January 15th will be a huge story. And that's what's happening to Trump. So he's not going to be president, so that's a relief. He was president, that's our collective shame. And the big lesson from today is, as well as we did in November, we've got to figure out how it's back to Christina's issue and Cynthia's issue. What are we going to do forward, given continued battles among Republicans and whatever agenda they run on? If they're running on a social agenda about our wokeicity, then we're going to have to figure out what we're going to say about that. And the number one thing we say about that is electing people that citizens can relate to, is nominating someone that they can relate to. So that's interesting. Questions, thoughts, final statements, benedictions from anybody here present?
I think that gal that won, Perez, I think
Yeah.
she's one heck of a candidate. I
Yeah,
mean, if you heard her talk, after the election, I think she's dynamite.
she's, as some of you know, she and her husband run a auto repair shop in Portland. It's going to be interesting because that district line's not going to change, so she's going to have to run hard just to win 2 years from now. A lot of us supported Carolyn Long 2 years ago, who was a great candidate, and Jamie Herrera Butler beat her like 50, like a drum, 56-44. So that shows that natural tendency of that district. So she's going to have to, she had 2 small children. She's going to have to work really hard just to survive 2 years from now, depending on what the national mood is. Whereas Schreier, I think now that she's won 3 times, I agree with you. I think the attraction of Perez is she can articulate the needs of working people and rural people in a way above average way for Democrats.
I think that's exactly it. She's done the work. She comes from a working class. She's a business owner, but and most importantly, as you just said, she can articulate it.
Yeah.
She talks about it very well.
We had her on the screen here with 20, 30 people, not Senior Center, but my Zoom screen. And she did, she was great. And there are Islanders who started giving up their coffee after that. There's quite a bit of financial support for her from the island, as there was for Schreier. So good for us. Winning by 2,000 votes, you can see your dollars count when you win by 2,000 votes.
She was on
Okay.
MSNBC and she did a great job also, on the big major station. She was interviewed. And yes, she did. She did a great job.
Christina, is that your hand up?
Oh,
It is. I just wanted to say quickly that I was sort of impressed, even though Nancy Pelosi is great at counting the numbers. She knows how to get things done. I'm so glad that they're starting to turn over leadership to people that are younger and people who are more diverse than what has been. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I think
Agreed.
it's interesting. I think Chief Jeffries has been preparing. I'm a little wishing that he had some kind of ability to discuss things with Kevin McCarthy, but he says that he has a decent relationship with Scalise, so maybe that will be the line of communication, because you have to have it. But it was nice that Steny Hoyer stepped aside when Pelosi did. Rather than trying to camp out in leadership. This is a new team and it's well selected.
yeah.
Clyburn's gonna be number 4 spot, even though he's 82, and that was a sign of respect to him. They didn't want him to stay, but he wanted to stay, and that's good. Robin, did you have your hand up? No.
Yes, I have a question. Are we basically done with the main subjects? I have a related question.
Yes, we are.
Okay. I want to know what you thought of Patty Murray's campaign ads on TV and the other people who submitted ads on her behalf. To me, they were very, very poor. They kept saying whoever the person running against her's name over and over and over again. And it didn't make her come across very positive. It reinforced the other person's name. I thought it was a terrible campaign. Luckily, people recognize her. She's got a power and status, but I just wondered if you had any reaction to at least her TV campaign.
Well, I mean, she won by 14, so they might argue that those ads were successful. What I said right before the election is I still, to this day, can't figure out whoever was pouring the money into Tiffany Smiley.
Yeah.
You know, that advertising was relentless with a lot of different ads and the use of her war hero husband and so forth. I thought they must know something. I said to our friend Delight that Patty was going to win by 16, but every time I said that, and in fact, even on this call, I eventually said 8 because I figured they must know something. I don't know if they didn't know anything, but I think what the ads were, I would contrast Patty's ads with Kim Schreier at the start had that great ad with the Republican mayor of Wenatchee. What a great ad.
Yeah,
And
beautiful.
you do that at the beginning. All I can figure out with regard to Patty, clearly she was going to win on choice. And so a lot of those ads were about choice, but she never, ever did a similar ad to Kim Schreier about who she is. And, you know, a lot of us have met Patty or know her, and she's really an amazingly successful and a good human being. I think the reason she didn't do that is it's not popular to talk about your 30 years of service. All it does is, so that positive ad would be, look how hard Patty's worked for you. But I think that can get turned on its head real fast because people aren't that pleased with the performance of the Congress. So saying that you're well tied to it can be a scary thing. I think that's why they did it that way. But even given that, I think you're right that sitting there, you're thinking, boy, they could do a better job of fending off this threat. And she may be done 6 years from now. I think Maria's up in 2 and not in 4. So I think we'll probably go back at this. I think we're a blue state. I don't think we're
Oh, yeah.
made all the more so by the Dobbs decision. So they spent millions and millions of money on. I tried to find out who was spending that, but there were
Yeah.
deep pockets behind Tiffany Smiley.
It's hard to find, the PACs and dark money.
Yeah,
I know I tried too, David.
But
so,
some of her regular campaign money you can look up, and I don't get it.
yeah.
Yeah, but I agree with Robin. I think you could have wished for a different maker of advertising, and the candidate's responsible. Most of those, 70% of those of what you're seeing were Patty's own ads, not super PACs.
Right.
Any final comments, thoughts? Well, next time we better
it.
talk about who's going to be the Democratic president of the United
Yeah.
States 2 years from now.
Cynthia, you have something to say before we go?
Yes. I was expecting that we'll get this big Christmas gift from the January 6th committee, and is there a Santa Claus?
Well, I think
something good.
the objective of the January 6th committee, before they went out of business, was to develop a much more clear and concrete and comprehensive narrative on what happened than happened during the rushed impeachment process. And so they did that, and in doing so, they influenced American opinion on what happened. And in doing so, they helped the Department of Justice immensely in evidence assembly and in the willingness of the American people to accept the indictment that's about to ensue. So that was their objective, and they met it. So there won't be some new startling final word from them. The startling final word will be Jack Smith's indictment, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to let you know before we go, first of all, David, thank you. And David, would you be back with us on January 6th? Believe
I
it,
will.
January 6th.
Oh,
Friday, January 6th.
celebrate.
And that's an ominous date. But anyhow, but I also want to let you all know is that we will no longer be doing something to talk about 11:30. We are moving to 1:30 in the afternoon. So please join us on January 6th at 1:30. And so you can talk directly to David and And you know, you were amazing. You know, pretty much all your predictions came true, and I know, like I said, you talk us off a cliff all the time, which I
Well,
really appreciate. So
Well, let's stay on the top of the cliff and not sliding
absolutely,
down
let's
in
not
the
stop.
rain.
Right.
But let's do the work that makes it possible to not be sliding down a cliff. It's all about the work that millions of Americans have done since this show started in 2016. So I feel good about it, and I think the worries that America is sliding downhill are not going to be borne out.
Good to hear.
Thank you.